Hey everybody, Pete with Optics for Birding here again. First off, thank you guys so much for watching and supporting our channel. We've gotten a lot of good feedback from you guys so far. A lot of you guys have watched our review on the BTX eyepiece that Swarovski makes for this whole modular spotting scope system that I got in front of me here. Today we're actually going to be taking a little bit of a detour and looking at their ATX, which is a much better seller. It's something that a lot of you are probably going to be a little bit more prone to than the BTX, but we're just trying to give you the full picture here. So just to define what that is real quick, this is the angled zoom eyepiece that Swarovski makes for their modular scope system. As you can see, it's a little bit different from how most of the scopes that we carry work, because you kind of break it in half and you've got this big eyepiece with the prism system attached, and then you've got the focusing system attached to the objective lens. So we're going to get a little bit into the weeds today, but just want to say this is what we're mainly reviewing. We're going to talk about the entire series, but once again, this is the Swarovski ATX. Let's get into it. Okay, so I just took them out the tripod to show you the size comparison between the eyepieces without being attached there, because it's a little bit hard to see when you're attaching it to the scope. But you get obviously a much smaller form factor when you're only using the single eye. The main advantage of the ATX over the BTX is that you can zoom in and out with this little ring here. So most of the bird watching community, the hunting community, astronomy community, a lot of you guys that come to us, you're looking for an eyepiece that can zoom in and out. It's just a feature that you have to have if you're more prone to looking for long observation periods and you want to look at something with both eyes. That's what the BTX is for. However, you can't zoom in and out with it. So the ATX is where most of you guys land. So I'm going to put this aside for today and we'll talk about the ATX. So the principle is kind of the same for the STX model. So if you guys like straight scopes, which doesn't apply to most of you, but there are plenty of people that prefer the straight viewing as opposed to this angled view like I have here. If you're looking for the exact same kind of quality, Swarovski does make basically the same thing in a straight configuration called the STX. But everything, with a couple exceptions that I'm going to cover today, is going to apply conceptually to both. So this review technically is going to be about the ATX, but it'll apply to the STX as well. So same story with either this or the STX or the BTX, is that you can connect them to any of these 4 different sizes of objective lens that Swarovski makes. If I put that down, I'll just show you the difference here. This is the smallest one that they make in the series, the 65 millimeter, really for people that are looking to pack light and they don't care about the low light performance too much. If we look at the other end of the spectrum, this monster over here is the 115 millimeter for people that need the best low light performance possible, the best resolution long distances, and portability is not really a concern. For most of you folks, we're going to land somewhere in the middle. So here are the 2 middle sizes. This is the 85 millimeter, this is the 95 millimeter, and the motto that I have when it comes to any optics purchase, whether it's binoculars, a scope, or anything in between, is that the best one is the one that you'll bring with you. So if you think that that's the 65, the 85, the 95, or if you really want to go for it and you don't care about portability so much with the 115, it just comes down to finding that perfect middle ground for yourself, because there are 4 different options here. It can be pretty overwhelming when you're looking at all this stuff side by side and you've got all these specifications that are floating around. I would say look at the overall size first, decide what you think is the biggest scope you're willing to take with you, and go with that, because the reason that I suggest the biggest one that you possibly can take is that that'll give you the best resolution, that'll give you the most brightness, and you're going to be able to zoom in a little bit more than you would with the smaller scopes. So with the ATX, again, you do have the ability to zoom in and out. With these 2 smaller lenses here, namely the 65 and the 85, their focal length is a little bit shorter than these 2 larger ones. So when you connect the ATX to either of these, and it connects the same way as with any of the 4 objectives, you're going to notice that there's a little arrow on the zoom ring, and as you spin it, it points to the different numbers that are on the objective lens. So those numbers, like I said, because the focal length depends on the objective lens, those magnification markings are actually part of it there. So when you zoom all the way out, that little arrow on the zoom wheel, the ATX, will point to 25. When you zoom all the way in, that's going to get up to 60. Now, that's the same story on the 65 and the 85, like I said. When you connect it to the larger ones that have a higher focal length, on the other hand, that arrow is going to line up with some different numbers. So it's a little bit hard to show you, but I'll turn it so you can see. The lowest magnification that you can have on either the 95 or the 115 is going to be 30. And then as you spin that to zoom all the way in, you're looking at 70. So, the difference in the magnification is hardly the thing to get hung up about here. I'm just trying to give you all the data. But just know, again, with the smaller objective lenses, your power is 25 to 60. With the larger ones, you're looking at 30 to 70, and we'll get into some of the other differences in a minute. If you do feel like those magnifications are not enough, just like we showed you in the BTX video, Swarovski does make a 1.7 magnification extender. Basically, that means that you're boosting your entire magnification range by 1.7. So just as an example, if you were to put these extenders on either the 115 or the 95 millimeter, rather than the 30 to 70 power that you would get just connecting this directly to the lens, all of a sudden your magnification is going to turn into 50 to 120, and those are marked on the extender as well. So you wedge that on there. Took me long enough. And then when you connect the eyepiece to it, you can see it adds a little bit of weight, a little bit of bulk, not too much. It really just comes down to whether or not you need that extra power. But then that little arrow that's on the zoom wheel is going to be pointing to those different numbers that are on the magnification extender. So that is a little quick detour just to show you the versatility of this whole system. One of the reasons that a lot of people gravitate toward this over some competitors is that, say you know that you always want the ability to zoom in and out, and you know you always want an angled scope. Well, that makes it pretty simple. You get the ATX, but you're not really sure what size you need, or you think that you might need different size scopes in different situations. What you can do, say you want, like a travel scope for certain situations, right? Obviously, you're going to go with the smaller option. So here's the ATX connected to the 65. Only a few pounds, pretty versatile, pretty easy to take in a backpack, especially since you can break the scope in half like this and store the components separately, as opposed to having to connect the whole thing and basically create a separate compartment for it. So again, say that's what you want half the time, and then when you go back to your house, you get back from your safari or whatever, and you want to look at the stars, you want to look at planets and things that are really far away in poor lighting conditions. That's where one of the larger objectives might come in. Or, say that you're doing some kind of observation in really early morning, late evening conditions where you barely have any light available. If portability is not so much of a concern there, then you can connect the ATX to the 115 or the 95. And you've got this powerhouse here that's really, really bright, can magnify a little bit more and give you that extra resolution at longer distances. So one thing to note is that with the 115 in particular, it is a very, very heavy scope. You're looking at almost 4 pounds for just the objective lens by itself. The ATX is going to add another couple. So with that kind of off balance design that you have here, it pretty much forces you to get a bigger tripod. So just keep that in mind. If you're starting from the ground up, you don't have a tripod or a scope and you're considering this whole package, if you get the 115, it kind of backs you into a corner where you have to get a bigger tripod as well. Whereas if you go with one of the smaller lenses that we carry, you're going to be able to get away with a smaller tripod and maintain that stability too. So probably our best seller at this point is the 95, because it gets you that same magnification that the 115 gets you, but just a much easier to carry scope, right? You can see the size difference just in this video. If you look at the spec tables online, you'll notice that this is at least another pound heavier than this guy. And there's just so many more people that are able to haul this around than this. Again, the tripod being smaller and more portable too helps. So if you really think that you want to go for it, the 115 is the biggest that we carry of any scope, but the 95 is a great option for people that are looking for a lot of brightness, just a lot more portability as well. I am a little biased, of course, because this is what I use personally. As a birder, I have never really been hurting with the 95 in low light conditions. If I'm out looking at owls and that kind of thing, I would of course love to have this, but for overall, like my daily driver, I use this because it's just a lot more portable than the 115, and I still get that extra power and, still really, really good low light performance. Before this came along, this was basically the brightest scope that we sold. So let's take that off again. All right, so now let's talk about the actual optics for a second. So a lot of you that have been following Swarovski since about 2010 or so, you might be familiar with the term SWAROVISION. It's just an umbrella term for all of their best optical technology. So every component in this series that you see, whether it's the eyepieces or the objective lenses, they all have that SWAROVISION technology. So what that means is the objective lenses have the best glass available, just like the eyepieces. They also have the best coatings that you get to give you that extra light transmission, to give you the best, color resolution that you can possibly have. And in the eyepieces, you've got, number one, a field flattening lens, which is supposed to minimize the distortion at the edges so that you don't get distracted by your peripheral vision. And secondly, one of the reasons that I, in particular, love this one is that it's got 20 millimeters of eye relief. I have found this is the easiest eyepiece for me to use personally with my glasses on. It just allows me to stay lined up with the center of the eyepiece. I have a little bit of wiggle room if I move my head back and forth. You know, obviously, whenever you're using any scope, you want to stay as close to the eyepiece as you can get. But naturally, when you're trying to like move your scope around and follow moving birds, and you're doing a ton of other things at a time, that extra little bit of wiggle room is a game changer for me personally. It might not matter to you at all. There are plenty of scopes that you can use with glasses, no problem, but it's very, very subjective. And one of the reasons that Swarovski made this with 20 millimeters of eye relief is that it gives eyeglass wearers a little bit of that extra wiggle room, or if you've got like particularly deep eye sockets, that can be really helpful. So with any of the 4 objective lenses, let's talk about the focusing. This is, I would say, completely personal preference, but there are plenty of people that enjoy having the focus as this design, which is a collar focus. A lot of other traditional spotting scopes, they might have a couple little knobs. Some people just prefer to be able to grab onto more and turn the wheel really slowly. On the other hand, one other reason that people like this is that right here, I can use one hand to focus and zoom at the same time. Typically, as you zoom and zoom and zoom, it's going to get out of focus just a little bit because it doesn't maintain the focus throughout the whole zoom range. So what I've found pretty useful is that as I zoom in and I get closer to 70 power, I can also use the same hand to spin the focus wheel at the same time to compensate for that. So there are plenty of other scopes that we sell that don't have that feature, and what you end up having to do is as you zoom in on the eyepiece dial right here, you're cranking that, and then you have to go to the focus and switch back and forth. This just makes it a little bit easier to operate with one hand. Am I being picky? Absolutely, but you know, when you're going to be using this a lot like I do, those little convenience features can really come into play. So, okay, so just a couple other kind of convenience features as far as the overall design goes. This is not at all unique to Swarovski whatsoever, but a nice feature for a lot of the scopes to have is there's a little knob that you can loosen on the collar, and that gives you the ability to rotate the eyepiece. So if you're looking at something and you have somebody that's next to you that's a lot shorter and you want to show them what's going on, you can rotate that eyepiece. The scope is still pointing in the same direction, so you're not going to lose your target, but all of a sudden the eyepiece is a little bit lower and it's more accessible for those people that are not quite as tall as you. So that's one. The second thing, and I'm going to illustrate this by pulling this out of the tripod, is on a lot of these newer Swarovski scopes, you'll see that little AS on the foot. What that means is that this is Arca Swiss compatible, and Arca Swiss is just a type of plate design for a lot of tripod heads. So, you know, with any tripod head that we sell, it'll come with a quick release plate so you can attach it to a camera or a scope or whatever. But if your scope has the same exact shape as that plate, what that means is that you can get rid of the plate entirely. You save yourself a little bit of weight, you save yourself some moving parts. And the way that this one works is that you've got a clamp that goes right onto the scope foot. So basically, when you connect it to the tripod, as opposed to just a quick release plate that you have to screw into the bottom of the scope, all of a sudden you've got these clamps that come down on the side of the scope foot itself. So that really keeps it from rotating at all. And you know, when you're at such high powers, even a tiny bit of rotation can really throw you off target. You don't want that happening unless you're actually trying to move the scope. So this Arca Swiss compatibility that Swarovski has on their scopes really helps with that. There are a lot of other manufacturers that make tripod heads with that Arca Swiss shape, and being able to put the scope foot directly into the head on a lot of different heads is just a useful feature for a lot of people. So that's not something that I think you should base your scope purchase around, but if you do have an Arca Swiss head, just know that you'll be able to use the scope directly with it. And Swarovski actually makes a couple tripod heads with the Arca Swiss plate. So that means that with either tripod of theirs that you can buy, you can put the scope directly in there, which is nice. Okay, so now we're going to bring the BTX back into the equation a little bit. The only reason I mention this is that if you think that you would ever benefit from having both eyes open at once, there are plenty of people who initially don't even think about that, and then they try the BTX and they're like, oh my God, this is a game changer. The reason I mention that is like initially, if you think that you need the ability to zoom in and out, just by going with the ATX system, you leave the door open for a binocular eyepiece in the future, because there's no other manufacturer that makes a binocular eyepiece. And if you think that you want to leave that door open and make it so that you can get different eyepieces in the future like this, Swarovski is really the only way to go, because nobody else makes a BTX type eyepiece. So just wanted to mention that really quick. Even if you think that it's not something you need right now, if you go with the ATX, that still leaves the door open for that. Or, you know, if there's anybody else that you might be using the scope with that would want to switch back and forth, that's a useful feature to have. So I hope that this gives you a better understanding of how this system works. Once again, you're always welcome to drop us a comment below or message us on social media if that's how you're seeing this and you want to learn a little bit more. You can always visit our website, opticsforbirding.com, to learn some more information. We have a review about these scopes that's written out if you're more of that type. And you can always, visit the dedicated pages for these to look at the specs and all that sort of stuff to compare them. So on top of that, I always encourage you guys to call us at 877-674-2473 to ask any questions you need. We'd love to chat about this stuff, as you can tell, and this is our bread and butter. So thank you again so much for watching. We'll see you soon.